We take the breath so we can grow the life. That heavy chest feeling, that tight throat sensation that shows up around 3 p.m., even when nothing's technically wrong. You've called it stress for years, but what's actually happening is a vagus nerve system failure, and it's holding your productivity hostage. Here's the thing nobody tells you. You don't need an hour-long meditation retreat to fix this. You need a tool that works in seconds, not hours. So today we're putting two contenders in the ring. On one side, an ancient practice refined over thousands of years, pranayama. On the other, a technique that became famous through a Stanford physiology lab and is now used in elite performance, military, at high-stress workplace settings, the physiological sigh. By the end of this video, you'll know exactly which one to use, when to use it, and how to combine both into a single protocol that switches your nervous system from threat mode to calm mode on command. Not someday, today, the next time you feel that tightness creep into your chest. Let's get into it. Let's talk about what 2026 actually feels like in your body. You wake up. Before your feet even hit the floor, you've already checked 3 notifications. Your nervous system, which evolved over hundreds of thousands of years to respond to actual physical threats, like a predator rustling in the grass, is now responding to a Slack message with the exact same chemical cascade it would use for a genuine emergency. Cortisol spikes, heart rate climbs slightly, your breathing gets shallow and high in the chest, your shoulders creep up toward your ears without you even noticing. And here's the brutal part, it doesn't stop there. Throughout the day, these microstressors stack on top of each other. Emails, deadlines, notifications, comparison scrolling, a slightly tense tone in a coworker's message, and your vagus nerve, which is supposed to be your body's built-in off switch, gets stuck in the on position. This is what I call digital paralysis. Your body's in a constant low-grade defensive posture, even while you're sitting perfectly still at a desk, perfectly safe, with nothing actually chasing you. Think about what that actually means biologically. Your body doesn't know the difference between a lion is hunting me and my boss left a passive-aggressive comment on my project. Both trigger the same sympathetic nervous system response, the fight or flight cascade. The only difference is that the lion situation resolves in minutes. The modern situation never resolves. It just keeps refreshing all day, every day. And the consequences aren't abstract. This is the actual mechanism behind brain fog. When your nervous system is locked in a defensive state, blood flow and resources get prioritized for survival functions and deprioritized for things like working memory, creative thinking, and that feeling of mental clarity you used to have. It's also why you can't switch off even hours after the workday ends. You close your laptop, you sit down for dinner, you lie in bed. Your body is still, the threat is long gone, but your nervous system is still running the simulation, still scanning, still bracing. That's why so many people describe lying awake at night with their mind racing even though nothing's wrong. Most people try to solve this by thinking their way out of it. Just relax, stop worrying about it, take your mind off it. But here's the problem. Your vagus nerve doesn't respond to thoughts. It's not a logic-based system. It's a physical, mechanical system that responds to physical signals. You cannot think your way into a parasympathetic state. You can't argue with your nervous system. You have to physically signal your way there, the same way you'd physically signal a frightened animal that it's safe, not by explaining the situation to it, but by changing your posture, your breathing, your physical presence. And that's where our two contenders come in. One is thousands of years old, refined by generations of practitioners through direct observation of the body and mind. One was discovered and mapped in a modern physiology lab using equipment that can measure heart rate variability down to the millisecond. Both claim to be the key that unlocks this physical override. Let's start with the ancient one. Pranayama isn't one technique, it's a whole category of yogic practices developed within yogic traditions, refined over literally thousands of years of careful, repeated observation of what breath patterns do to the body and mind. One of the most well-known is Nadi Shodhana, or alternate nostril breathing. You'd block one nostril, inhale slowly through the other, switch, and exhale through the opposite side. Slow, deliberate, almost meditative in its rhythm. There's also Ujjayi breath, sometimes called ocean breath, where you slightly constrict the back of your throat to create a soft, audible hiss on both the inhale and exhale, slowing everything down even further. What all of these techniques share is a deliberate manipulation of breath rate, breath depth, and crucially, the ratio between your inhale and your exhale. Here's why this works, and it's not mystical, it's mechanical. When you slow your breath down, especially when you extend the exhale longer than the inhale, you're sending a direct bottom-up signal to your brainstem, specifically to an area that talks directly to your vagus nerve. This signal says, in essence, we are not in danger, you can stand down. This is a bottom-up process. You're not trying to convince your brain with logic, with affirmations, with willpower. You're using the body, the breath, the diaphragm, the rhythm of inhale and exhale to talk directly to the part of the nervous system that controls fight or flight. It's like going around the front desk and walking straight into the manager's office. There's also a fascinating secondary effect that almost nobody talks about: CO2 tolerance training. Most people assume the goal of breathing is to get more oxygen, but the trigger for that panicky, I need to breathe feeling is actually not low oxygen, it's rising CO2. Your body has chemoreceptors that monitor CO2, and when they spike, they trigger an alarm response. Anxiety, the urge to gasp, that uncomfortable can't get a full breath sensation. When you practice slow, controlled breathing patterns regularly, especially ones that involve breath retention or extended exhales, you're training your body to tolerate higher levels of CO2 without triggering that panic response. Over time, this builds what I'd call a higher stress ceiling. Your baseline threshold for what counts as an emergency goes up. Things that used to spike your heart rate, a sudden notification, an unexpected confrontation, a tight deadline, stop registering as threats at all. Your nervous system simply has more headroom before it tips into alarm mode. So pranayama isn't just a quick fix for an acute moment of stress, though it can help with that too. It's a long-term recalibration of your nervous system's sensitivity dial. Practiced consistently, it changes your baseline. It changes what counts as calm for you. There's also a meditative dimension to this that shouldn't be dismissed.
The act of focusing on your breath, counting the inhale, counting the exhale, noticing the pause between them, pulls your attention away from rumination. It's a form of present moment anchoring. While your nervous system is being recalibrated mechanically through the breath itself, your mind is also being pulled out of the anxiety spiral it was caught in. Now, a quick myth to clear up here, because it trips a lot of people up. There's a common belief that deep breathing always means big, dramatic, chest-expanding breaths, gasping in as much air as possible. But in most pranayama traditions, the emphasis is actually on control and smoothness rather than sheer volume. A breath can be relatively small in volume, but still be deeply effective if it's slow, even, and the exhale is extended. In fact, forcing huge breaths can sometimes increase tension in the shoulders and chest, which works against the calming effect you're going for. The goal isn't more air, it's more control. But here's the honest, frustrating truth that most wellness content won't tell you. These techniques typically require several minutes to produce a noticeable effect. They require a quiet space, or at least a space where you feel comfortable closing your eyes and focusing inward. They require you to sit down, settle in, and commit to the practice, even just for 5 minutes. And if you're in the middle of a high-stakes meeting, stuck in traffic with someone tailgating you, sitting in a waiting room before a difficult appointment, or about to walk into a confrontation, you don't have several minutes in a quiet room. You have maybe 10 seconds, and you have an audience. This is the gap, the real-world practical gap between this works and this works right now in this exact moment without anyone noticing. And it's exactly the gap that our second contender claims to fill. The physiological sigh is mechanically simple, but the science behind it is genuinely elegant, and it's worth slowing down to actually understand what's happening, because the why is what makes this technique so reliable. Here's the technique itself. 2 inhales through the nose, 1 full, deep breath, then immediately a second, shorter top-up inhale right on top of it without exhaling in between, followed by 1 long, slow exhale through the mouth. That's it. Double inhale, long exhale. You can do it in under 15 seconds. Now, here's what's actually happening inside your lungs when you do this, and this is where it gets interesting. Your lungs are covered in millions of tiny air sacs called alveoli. This is the literal site of gas exchange, the interface between the air you breathe and the blood that carries oxygen to every cell in your body. Under stress, and honestly under normal shallow breathing too, many of these alveoli partially collapse. They deflate slightly, like tiny balloons that have lost a bit of air. When this happens across millions of alveoli, your overall gas exchange efficiency drops. You're getting less oxygen in and less carbon dioxide out per breath, even if you don't consciously notice it. That second top-up inhale does something very specific. It provides just enough additional pressure to pop these collapsed alveoli back open, re-inflating them and maximizing the surface area available for gas exchange in that single breath. It's like giving a slightly deflated balloon one more small puff of air to bring it back to full size. Then, the long exhale does the real work for your nervous system. A slow, extended exhale, especially one that's noticeably longer than your inhale, activates the parasympathetic branch of your nervous system. This is the branch responsible for rest and digest, the opposite of fight or flight, and the effect is fast. We're talking a measurable, real-time drop in heart rate, often within seconds of that exhale beginning. Here's the key distinction between this and pranayama, and it's an important one. The physiological sigh is mechanical. It works whether you believe in it or not, whether you're calm enough to focus or not, whether you're a skeptic who thinks breathwork sounds a little too woo-woo. It doesn't require faith. It doesn't require a meditative mindset. It's a reflex you're deliberately, voluntarily triggering, not a meditative state you have to gradually enter. Pranayama, by contrast, requires a degree of discipline and a mental shift into a practice. You're settling into something. The sigh requires almost nothing in terms of mental preparation. You can do it with your eyes wide open, mid-conversation, sitting in a meeting, scrolling through your phone, and nobody will notice anything except that you took a slightly bigger breath than usual. That alveoli pop is, in a very real sense, the secret weapon here. In a 2026 workplace when high-stakes demands come in rapid succession, back-to-back video calls with zero buffer time, sudden deadline changes dropped into a group chat, difficult feedback delivered 5 minutes before your next meeting, you don't have 10 minutes in a quiet room. You have maybe 10 seconds, and you have an audience. The physiological sigh is built for exactly that moment. There's also research suggesting that this technique was specifically studied for its rapid effects on mood and physiological arousal compared to other breathing patterns, and the standout finding was how quickly the effects showed up even with just a few repetitions. So now we've got two genuinely powerful tools on the table. One is a long-term recalibration system, slow, deliberate, builds your baseline resilience over weeks and months. The other is an instant, invisible, in-the-moment reset button. Fast, mechanical, works in seconds regardless of your mental state. But here's where it gets interesting. Which one actually wins when the pressure is real, when you're not in a calm studio environment, but in the middle of an actual stressful day? Let's get into the data, because this is where theory meets reality. When researchers and biohackers track heart rate variability, HRV, which is essentially a measure of how well your nervous system can shift between stress and calm, how flexible and responsive your autonomic nervous system is, the results tell an interesting and somewhat surprising story. A 5-minute pranayama session produces a steady, gradual increase in HRV during and after the practice. It's not instant. You're not going to feel a dramatic switch flip sensation in the first 30 seconds. The benefits build over the course of the practice itself, and they tend to compound with consistency. Daily practice over weeks shows cumulative improvements in baseline HRV, meaning your nervous system becomes more resilient and adaptable even outside of the practice sessions. 3 physiological sighs, on the other hand, produce a measurable drop in heart rate and a corresponding spike in HRV within about a minute, sometimes faster. It's fast, it's immediate, it's almost shocking how quickly the body responds.
Think of it this way. Pranayama is like a slow-burning fire that gradually warms an entire room over the course of an evening. The physiological sigh is like flipping on a space heater right next to you. Immediate, localized, intense relief, but it doesn't change the temperature of the whole room on its own. Now let's talk about something almost nobody discusses, and it's massive in practical, real-world terms: the social friction factor. Try doing Nadi Shodhana, blocking one nostril with your finger, breathing slowly, eyes closed, that distinctive rhythm in the middle of a boardroom presentation, or during a tense client call where you're on camera, or in a crowded subway car during your commute, surrounded by strangers. It's simply not discreet. People will notice. Someone might ask if you're okay, or worse, assume something's wrong with you. You might feel self-conscious even attempting it, and that self-consciousness itself adds a layer of social stress on top of whatever you were already dealing with, which somewhat defeats the purpose of the exercise in the first place. The physiological sigh, by contrast, is nearly invisible in almost any setting. A double inhale and a long exhale looks like someone taking a slightly deeper breath, maybe someone settling in their chair. You can do it while making eye contact during a difficult conversation, while typing an email, while sitting in traffic with your hands on the wheel and someone in the car next to you glancing over. Nobody clocks it as that person is doing a breathing exercise. Let's make this concrete with a couple of scenarios, because abstract data is easy to nod along to and then forget. Scenario 1. You're a few minutes away from a performance review you're dreading. Your manager hasn't been subtle about their concerns, and you can feel your heart rate climbing just thinking about walking into that room. You have 90 seconds before the meeting starts. In that window, pranayama isn't realistic. You'd barely get through one full breath cycle before you'd need to walk in anyway, and you'd walk in mid-practice, which would actually make things worse. But 3 physiological sighs done at your desk with your eyes open take less than 30 seconds and can measurably bring your heart rate down before you stand up and walk through that door. This is precisely the kind of moment the sigh was built for. Scenario 2, it's been a brutal week. Every day has felt like back-to-back fires. Your sleep has been fragmented, and you've noticed you're more irritable with people you care about, short with your partner, impatient with your kids, snapping at small things that wouldn't normally bother you. In this case, a single physiological sigh isn't going to fix a week of accumulated dysregulation. What actually shifts this is consistent pranayama practice over the following days, 5 or 10 minutes each morning, rebuilding your baseline, gradually expanding that stress ceiling we talked about earlier so that the same week's worth of demands doesn't hit your system as hard. Notice what's happening in both scenarios. It's not that one tool is better in some abstract sense, it's that each tool is matched to a different kind of problem. An acute spike calls for the sigh. Chronic accumulation calls for pranayama. Most people only ever learn one of these tools and then try to use it for everything, which is like owning only a hammer and wondering why it's not working great on the screws. There's another layer to this worth mentioning, combining the two within a single session. Some practitioners use a physiological sigh or two as a kind of on-ramp before settling into a longer pranayama practice. The sigh quickly takes the edge off acute arousal, dropping your heart rate and easing that immediate tightness, which then makes it easier to settle into the slower, more meditative rhythm that pranayama requires. Instead of trying to force yourself to slow down while your nervous system is still revved up, you use the fast tool to create just enough space for the slow tool to actually work. So here's the verdict, and it's nuanced because the honest answer isn't one of these is better, it's they're better at different things. For immediate, emergency, in-the-moment relief, when you need your heart rate down right now in the next 30 seconds without anyone around you noticing, the physiological sigh wins. It's faster, more discreet, and doesn't require any setup. But for long-term nervous system rewiring, for actually raising your baseline resilience, expanding your stress ceiling through carbon dioxide tolerance, and making yourself genuinely less reactive to stresses over time, pranayama's cumulative, consistent practice has the edge. It's not about the single session. It's about what happens to your nervous system after 30 consecutive days of practice. And here's the realization that changes everything. Choosing one or the other is the actual mistake. Treating this like a competition where only one tool can win misses the point entirely. The real hack isn't which one is better, it's how you integrate both into a single layered system that covers both your long-term baseline and your in-the-moment emergencies. Here's how to actually structure this across your day, and I want to walk through this in enough detail that you can start tonight or tomorrow morning, not someday. In the morning, before the digital noise starts, ideally before you've even picked up your phone, use pranayama. Even 5 minutes of slow alternate nostril breathing or simple extended exhale breathing, where your exhale is roughly twice as long as your inhale, primes your nervous system for the day ahead. Think of it like calibrating your stress ceiling before the demands start hitting. You're essentially telling your nervous system, here's what calm feels like. Remember this, before the day has a chance to drag you into reactivity.
This doesn't need to be elaborate. You don't need a meditation cushion, incense, or a 20-minute ritual. Sit on the edge of your bed, 5 minutes. Slow inhale through the nose, slower exhale through the nose. That's enough to start shifting your baseline. Then, throughout the day, whenever you hit one of those spike moments, right before a hard conversation, immediately after reading a stressful email, the second you sit down after a tense meeting, in the elevator after someone said something that got under your skin, that's when you deploy the physiological sigh. 2 inhales through the nose, 1 long exhale through the mouth. Repeat that sequence 3 times. The whole thing takes less than 30 seconds and nobody around you will know it happened. You can think of these 2 practices as operating on 2 different time scales. Pranayama is your daily infrastructure, the equivalent of going to the gym to build strength you'll rely on later. The physiological sigh is your emergency reset, the equivalent of having a fire extinguisher within reach. You don't want to wait until there's a fire to think about fire extinguishers, and you don't want to wait until you're mid-panic to think about your breath. Morning priming with pranayama, real-time emergency resets with the physiological sigh, deployed as many times throughout the day as you need.
That's the protocol. Simple enough to remember, specific enough to actually use. But here's the honest truth, and I say this because I want this to actually work for you, not just sound good in a video and then get forgotten by Thursday. Most people who learn these 2 techniques today will still be stuck in the exact same patterns 3 months from now. Not because the techniques don't work, they absolutely do. The research and the lived experience of people who use them consistently backs that up. But because there's no tracking system, no feedback loop, no way to look back after 2 weeks and say, okay, my resting heart rate is down, I'm recovering from stressful moments faster, this is actually working. Without that feedback, motivation quietly erodes. The morning pranayama session gets skipped just today. The physiological sigh gets forgotten in the moment because there's no prompt, no reminder, nothing connecting the technique to the trigger. And within a month, you're back where you started, except now you've also got a slight sense of having failed at yet another wellness habit, which adds its own layer of frustration. Now, a few things people run into when they first start this, because I'd rather you know about these now than get discouraged in week 1. The first thing, the morning pranayama session might feel boring or even slightly uncomfortable at first. If you're someone whose mind is constantly active, sitting still for 5 minutes with nothing to do but breathe can feel almost agitating in the beginning, like an itch you can't scratch. This is normal. It's actually a sign that your nervous system has been running in a heightened state for a while, and slowing down feels unfamiliar. Don't take this discomfort as a sign that the practice isn't working or isn't for you. Stick with it for at least a week before judging the effect, because the changes in baseline HRV we talked about earlier don't show up after 1 session. They show up after consistent repetition. The second thing, with the physiological sigh, people sometimes feel a little lightheaded on their first few attempts, especially if they take the second top-up inhale too forcefully or hold their breath at the top instead of moving smoothly into the exhale. The fix is simple. Keep both inhales gentle and make sure the exhale is slow and long, almost like you're fogging up a mirror very slowly. If you ever feel dizzy, that's your cue to ease off the intensity of the inhales, not to abandon the technique. The third thing, and this might be the most important, don't wait for a big, stressful moment to practice the sigh. If you only ever use it during genuine emergencies, a difficult confrontation, a panic-inducing deadline, you're trying to learn a new skill under the worst possible conditions, like trying to learn to swim for the first time while someone's pushing you into the deep end. Instead, practice the sigh during low-stakes moments too. While you're waiting for a web page to load, between tasks, right after you sit down at your desk in the morning before anything has gone wrong yet. This builds familiarity with the technique so that when you do need it in a high-stakes moment, your body already knows the pattern and can execute it smoothly, almost automatically. There's a deeper principle here that applies to both techniques. The goal isn't to wait until you're already overwhelmed and then try to claw your way back to baseline. The goal is to catch the rise early, that first subtle tightening in the chest, that first flicker of irritation, that moment before the spiral really gets going, and intervene right there. The earlier you catch it, the less work either technique has to do, and the faster you recover. This is also where the tracking piece becomes so valuable, beyond just motivation. When you start paying attention to your own patterns, noticing, for example, that your stress consistently spikes around the same time each day, or after the same type of meeting, or in response to the same person, you start to see the shape of your own nervous system's triggers. And once you can see the pattern, you can place your interventions strategically. A physiological sigh right before that recurring afternoon meeting, a few extra minutes of pranayama on the mornings you know are going to be demanding. You move from reactive to proactive. This is the exact gap I built my nervous system masterclass to close, bridging the distance between knowing these techniques, which is the easy part, and actually automating a more resilient biology, which is the part that requires structure, tracking, and a system that holds you accountable to your own progress. Inside, we go deeper into vagal tone measurement, build out personalized protocols based on your specific stress patterns, and create the kind of feedback loop that turns "I should probably do this" into "this is just part of how my day works now." If you want to start simple before going any further, join the email list below for a free vagal tone tracking template. It's a straightforward way to start measuring your own progress, your resting heart rate trends, your recovery times, so you have actual data instead of vague impressions. That's the difference between hoping something is working and knowing it is. It's the first concrete step towards moving from chronic stress to consistent, measurable peak performance. So here's your action item for today. Tomorrow morning, before you check your phone, try 5 minutes of slow, extended exhale breathing. And the next time you feel that familiar tightness creep into your chest during the day, stop. 2 inhales through the nose, 1 long exhale through the mouth. 3 times. Try the protocol today. Morning pranayama, real-time sighs. And let me know in the comments, which one surprised you more, the slow ancient practice or the quick mechanical hack? Hit subscribe. And here's what I want you to walk away with more than any single technique. Your nervous system isn't broken, it's not malfunctioning. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do, protecting you from threats. The problem is that the modern world has flooded it with signals it was never built to handle, all day, every day, without pause. You don't need to fight your nervous system. You don't need to override it with sheer willpower. You just need to give it the right signals at the right moments so it knows when it's actually safe to stand down. That's all either of these techniques really is, a signal, a message sent through the body that says, "We're okay now." We take the breath so we can grow the life. I'll see you in the next one.